Greetings all, welcome back to another session here of Tuesday Talks. Today we're going to be looking at English grammar, and in particular we're going to be looking at the tense aspect modality system. Basically we're looking at what we would normally call tenses and how they interact and how we can play with them and move between the tenses when we're writing and when we're speaking. We're going to be looking at a couple of the historical researchers and what their ideas were with regard to how to teach this interaction. It certainly can be confusing for second language learners. So we're going to look at Bull's framework. We're going to look at some other researchers like Chavlabov and Shu. I'm going to throw some of my ideas in there as well, and then we're going to just end up with some comments regarding tense aspect and how we can teach them. How are tense and aspect used in language? Well, users typically jump around depending on the topics that they're referring to. Sometimes they can jump between tenses, they can jump between aspects depending on where their mental state is at the time. If they're trying to tell a story, a narrative, they may jump into the past. But at the same time, they may imagine that they're in the past and then start talking in the present. We'll look at some of these examples as we go. But in any event, we jump around from tense to tense and aspect to aspect. Here's an example. I have a headache. Okay, present tense. I have a headache that I've had for 2 hours, so I'm going to take an aspirin. I'm not going to take a headache, so I'm going to take an aspirin. But I went from present, I have a headache, and then I went to past, that I have had for 2 hours. Right now I'm in the past. I'm going to take. Now I'm in the future. So I jump around in that one sentence with three different tenses, okay? Because of the truth statements that I'm making and my mental location, my mental chronological location. So that's just the way they are. Students need to recognize that they're going to be jumping around sometimes. Sometimes they're going to be in the present, talking about the past in the present tense. You just have to understand and show them how these things work about. To master this level of language, they need to study above the sentence level. Now, obviously, if you're going to be dealing with lower level students and they're still trying to grapple with the sentence level, it's going to be more difficult to do this. Having a referential understanding better helps understand the intended meaning. Okay, and all this means is, where is this person mentally? Where are they thinking in their head? Right? I can talk about cooking lasagna last night, and I was in the kitchen, and I was making the eggs, and I lost my ring. Well, I could talk about all that in the past, or I could now say to myself, okay, now I'm in the kitchen yesterday, and I am making lasagna. Now I'm talking in, as in the progressive, because I'm in my head. I'm going through the process, even though it's in the past, right? So it depends on where you are. It depends on where the speaker or the sender of information is. You have to understand where he is before you can understand what it means, or what that tense actually means. Okay? All right. So how do ESL teachers teach these to language students? That's not going to be easy in some sense. But the higher up they get, the more you can start to play. Some things you can do are use graphics like this. I love these graphics. In particular, I saw these from Azar. Azar is basically she does, what does she do? She does textbooks for ESL students. She does grammar textbooks, but throughout her book she has little frames like this that are just excellent ways to try to picture what's going on. Bull's idea for this framework of jumping in between tenses and aspects included four time frames, which were past, present, future, and hypothetical. He was actually doing this to try to describe Spanish interaction for learners of Spanish, and the Larson, Freeman, Cels Murcia have taken this idea and they're trying to incorporate it into teaching English language learners about our tense and aspect. Native speakers intermingle a variety of these tenses when communicating. And so, just like the example I gave you in the past, I have a headache, I have had it for 2 hours, so I'm going to, past, present, future. Just a little bit of a description here about what's going on. Typically, you've got your past, present, future. Okay, and so here's a past event, here's a present event, here would be a future event, right? The little X here. Okay, those are one-time things. When you're dealing with the perfect tense, you're dealing with two-time events. One time here, you know, another time here. They're two-timed events. So it's not just now, but it's sometime in the future. It's not just the past, it's also up until now. It's not from the past, it's not just in the past, but it's from the past to the past. Okay, so perfect tenses are actually two-timed events, right? I had. Okay, had would be from the past to the past. Have had. I have had this headache for 2 hours. Sometime in the past until now, right? Have had. So I'm going to, I will have finished would be, for an example. From now until sometime into the future. It's a two-timed event. Okay, it's a longer duration. So that's a good thing to see, and you can see that with the graphics like this. I was very glad to see this in other texts as well, but when you're trying to teach the aspects and when you're trying to see how they interact, if you have these graphics and you can begin to overlay them, you'll be able to show students more about what's going on in the mind of the speaker or the sender of information. So, for example, would you like to join us for dinner? Okay, no thanks. I already ate. Already ate. Sometime in the past until now. Sometime in there. I did eat. Right. All right. I completed eating. All right. Just an example. Okay, let's go on to more of Bull's ideas here. He was basically trying to show how these points of access will alter the writing that's going on, the speaking that's going on. And so he's got a bunch of examples here if we're talking about before or after a particular access point. And all of these can be an access point. This could be one, this could be one, this could be one. All of these can be an access point. And if we're talking about before the access point or after the access point, the same thing would be here, right? All of these will change the way the sentences are created. Okay, let's just go back and look at some. Before 5 p.m., he will have arrived. Okay, this is 5 p.m. So it's from now until the future. Will have arrived. Okay, if it's present, he has lived here for 60 years. I'm talking right now, right? He has lived here for 60 years. So sometime in the past, all the way up until now, has lived, right? We're going to use the present perfect tense. Past, before the access, time before, right? He had eaten the pie before I arrived, right? Had eaten. I arrived here. Before that, he had arrived. So it's two times. Past, from the past to the past. Okay, would be past perfect. Present perfect would be from the past until now. Future perfect, from now until sometime in the future. Two-timed event. Okay, if the access time for the event is now, and I'm going into the future, right? He will go to the park at 10 o'clock. He's going, so I'm thinking again now. She sings every morning in the shower. The access is now. Now it's the word sings. Now, I would disagree with this one actually, when we're talking about she sings in the shower every morning. Every morning indicates to me that it's a habitual action. And habitual actions, in some sense, are timeless. It's an event that always happens on a particular day at a particular time. A little different than the actual now that's being talked about here or in the present progressive. This is a habitual event. It would be a different type of thing. Okay, now if the access is now and we're talking about one time in the past. She drove me to the game. Okay, that would be like something like this. It's a one-time event. There's no two-time events. It's just a one-time event. Okay. All right. She drove me to the game. Now, if the time is after the access point, so now this is future. After he finishes, he will come home. Okay. So again, we say here's where I'm talking about. No. Yeah, here's where we're talking about, and we're saying after this event, something will happen, right? After he finishes, he will come home. Not a future perfect, it's only one time. Present, I'm saying about now, and I'm going just one time. He will come later. These basically should be the same. And then there's after he won the game, he went out to celebrate. Okay, he went out after he won the game. He went out to celebrate. Okay, so this is a past event. After he won the game, he went out to celebrate. Okay, so that's somewhere in here. And that actually does sound like a two-timed event, doesn't it? After he won, he went out to celebrate, and it's just one-time event. That one's kind of interesting. You know, I would normally see two times here, because I see after he won, he went. So it's a past, but it's not combining the two, right? All right, and that's Bull's framework. Again, I understand what he's trying to do and how he's trying to show you this time before this time and this time before that time. To me, this is going to be confusing when teaching tenses to students. I would much rather say, you know, you've got single event issues, right, past, present, future, and then you've got multiple event issues, right? That's going to be your perfects. From the past until now, from the past to the past, from the present to the future, and even from the future to the future. To me, that's going to be a lot easier than trying to talk about accesses and orientations with students. Okay. Again, which is why I like the way this looks. And we can do the same thing. We can do something similar with progressive. We can add an icon that indicates that something began in the past, it was in progress, and then some other event happened, or it's not complete yet, right? I am eating. Started in the past, it's happening now, and will continue, hopefully, into the future until I finish eating, right? Type of thing. So these icons are very nice in that way. It's a visual that you can show students. Okay, let's take a look at some others. Chaffee, in his research, indicated that tenses must be maintained unless there's a generic tense marker or a new time marker that gets introduced. And what he calls a generic time marker is what I would call timeless or habitual. So, for example, he may be talking about the crime of the century. You know, this happened in Lexington in the 1850s, and and then he may stop and say, "Did you know that the word crime is actually a Latin word, right? Or is actually a French word?" Okay, now he's using the present tense. He was talking about the past that happened in, and it was this, but then he brings up this generic, "Hey, by the way, did you know that this word is?" Okay, he would consider that a generic. I would simply consider that a change in the... He's left the story, and now he's talking about an abstract concept, and abstract concepts are typically in the present. 2 plus 2 is 4. You would never say 2 plus 2 was 4, because it's an abstract concept, okay? That's the way I would look at it. Introducing a new time marker, sure. Okay, we've introduced a new time element, and it happens in a different time. Therefore, we go into that different time frame. That makes sense. But the generic, to me, there are a number of things that you can do with that. It's nice that he recognized that. Don't know how well that's going to be helpful in teaching second language learners. Labov has posited some narrative parts. He's actually taking this out of literature analysis. The parts of a story include abstract, orientation, action, evaluation, result, and coda. And his idea is that these elements are important to try to describe language usage and tense and aspect changes when teaching language. There's also the historical past. And this is when people use the present tense to talk about past events. Okay, so again, someone is teaching about Washington, and they're saying, and now when Washington crosses the Delaware, he looks around and he sees, whatever. Actually, when Washington is stuck on the New Jersey side, at night, he goes out and he prays for God to provide a way across. Now, I'm using all the present tense. This is all historical past. Okay, but my speaking is like putting you in the event as it's happening. Putting you in the event, then and there, even though it's a past event. another way that we can use language, another way that you can describe how that is. Then there's the 2Z point, and that's the point I want to make, is in order for us to understand what's going on, we have to know where the receiver is in his head. We have to understand where this is, and then we can understand what's being said. At the same time, if I can understand where I am as a language speaker, I can begin to switch between tenses and times more easily. The important thing is to know where I am when I'm speaking. When I say where, I'm referring to chronologically where. Where in time am I? Am I going to be in the future and look into the past, and then I'll say in the past? Am I going to imagine that I'm in the past and then speak? Well, then I'm going to be progressive, or I'm going to be, present. Okay? That to me is going to be the easiest way to explain this. That and these lovely little charts here that can help us explain with the icons. That's the way I would be doing this more so than anything. All right, let's go look at Shu's frame, and he's going to show that native speakers use one kind of tense or aspect to introduce a topic, and then they're going to switch to another to elaborate more. So in other words, they're going to get into more details. They're going to probably switch to a different tense. Okay, so I went to the movie, and while I was at the movie, I was watching, I was sitting. Okay, now I've changed from I went to was ing. Well, while I was sitting there, I heard, someone was talking about. Now I'm getting into the progressive because I've gone into more detail, and that's basically what he's saying. And that is true. I don't know, again, how useful this is going to be for teaching, but it is a point that you can certainly show. Some other differences that we should be showing students. One very strong one is the use of will and be going to. They are not the same. Sometimes they are and sometimes they aren't. Will and be going to sometimes indicates a willingness. Sometimes it indicates prediction. And be going to is often used for pre-planned events. Just to give you a real quick example of some of these, we can look at some examples that I found online, and there are a number of places where you can go see these. So there's not any one place. Okay, talking about future events, will. Talking about future events and possibility, okay, again, will. Making a prediction is oftentimes going to be going to. Okay, and making a prediction can be will, okay. Okay, now, at the moment of making a decision, this is the last one, right? You use will. I will do this. Once it's made, so now the decision is in the past, and it's going to be done in the future, then we go to be going to. That's that pre-planned. This is something that you can teach students the difference of, right? Right, I will go, I am going. Yes, I planned in the past, right, the first time, or the second time. The first time is, okay, I'm making the declaration, I will go. Also, willingness, right? Someone knocks on the door and you say, I will get it, right? Someone needs a problem and you say, okay, I'll do that, okay? Willingness to do something. So there are other places out there and other examples that you can look and see to try to find this. Again, you're probably going to break down eventually to those three things, which are willingness, pre-planned, and prediction. And be going to is generally the one that's used for pre-planned, okay? There's also differences in other elements like used to and would, okay? I used to do things, right? Used to as a habitual past, something that had been doing over and over again in the past, right? I used to ride my bike to school. Or I would say I would ride my bike to school. And in the end, those sound similar, but would has less of an idea of something that you did habitually. Okay? Last one here is oral dynamics, that prepositional phrases are used for clarification when you're in an interactive setting. And Shu gives a number of examples for that. Again, not something that I would probably jump into, although you do want to show the prepositional phrases of time so that students can understand what they are. I want to end by quoting Selce, Mercia, Larson, Freeman in their textbook. This one listed here. And the thing that they're saying here is the text aspect modality can only really be grasped when we consider their discourse, pragmatic, and interactional features as well as their formal and semantic features. Okay, now that's a mouthful. full, to try to understand what's going on within the discussion and the pragmatic elements that are involved and the interactional elements that are involved, in my mind, are simply too confusing for second language learners, especially as they're trying to grapple with this. The easier method would be to be playing with things in this design here that Azar and Larson Freeman Sells Mercy have put in their text regarding these types of icons on a timeline. The best way to describe it. It is a difficult system. Okay, I would simply begin with the simple things, and when they grasp them, move on to the more difficult ones. And remember that students, listeners, receivers of information, whether it's written or spoken, are not going to be able to understand what is going on unless they first understand the mind, the location, the chronological location of the sender, the speaker or the writer. And that's all for this one. I do hope this was helpful. Hope you can find some other information online as well. And again, if you have any questions, please let me know. Talk to you.